It all started with what looked like harmless flyers, thick glossy paper, bright clip art houses, and a bold title. Introducing the Maple Hills Neighborhood Enrichment Committee. The word HOA was suspiciously absent, which is probably why most neighbors didn't question it at first. Karen, our well-coached self-appointed queen of cul-de-sacs, claimed it was just a fun community initiative to keep the neighborhood looking Pinterest-worthy. She appeared at our doors with a pearly smile, a clipboard, and those artificially perfect energy bars that tasted like sadness. The flyer listed things like monthly landscaping themes, approved driveway coatings, and something called a fence color coordination protocol. Most people assumed it was a glorified block party committee, but I should have known better when she said, "Participation is voluntary but strongly encouraged." She was already sniffing around my yard the next day, holding a tape measure and murmuring about aesthetics. I caught her eyeing my concrete driveway like it had insulted her personally, and that's when I realized this woman wasn't here to enrich anything. She was building an empire. A week later, the same flyer came back, but now with a new line in bold red ink, "Official neighborhood guidelines, subject to penalties." Wait, penalties? For what? Parking my own truck in my own driveway? Apparently, yes. Karen had drafted a 14-page compliance document, printed in Comic Sans, where she invented absurd rules like no lawn gnomes over 12 inches and holiday lights must be down within 36 hours of December 26. The kicker? Violations incurred a fine of $500 per day. Suddenly, our cul-de-sac was under siege by the world's pettiest tyrant. She even had a self-printed badge with the words Interim Neighborhood Director, which she flashed like she was deputized by the president. My neighbor Greg laughed when he first got a notice for his unsanctioned mailbox decor, thinking it was a prank. It wasn't. The next day, she placed a laminated citation on his porch, sealed with a gold sticker that said, "Care Necked, Verified Violation." That was the name she gave her made-up enforcement network. No joke. She also made us download a Google Drive folder where she uploaded weekly compliance reports on our homes, complete with photos she clearly took herself, sometimes at night. Creepy. When someone confronted her about the legality of this committee, she clutched her pearls and said, "Well, if you're against keeping the neighborhood beautiful, that's your right, I guess." Classic gaslight. People started falling in line, not because they agreed, but because they were intimidated, especially the retirees who didn't want to be harassed for their Christmas inflatables. My house? I refused to play along. So I became her first official non-compliant resident. She taped the title to my trash bin. I thought it was funny, until I saw she had filed a lien on my property. I hadn't even signed anything. That's when I dug deeper and learned something Karen didn't want anyone to know. She had secretly filed paperwork with the county to incorporate her fake committee as a real HOA entity. How? She'd used a loophole meant for new developments, based on a 2002 blueprint of a planned community that was never fully built. Legally sketchy? Extremely. But it gave her just enough smoke and mirrors to scare people. Suddenly, her $500 fines weren't just idle threats, at least not in her eyes. That's when I knew this wasn't about grass height or mailbox flags. Karen was trying to control us. So I stopped laughing and started documenting every notice, every flyer, every insane rule. Because if she wanted a war over a fake HOA, she just picked the wrong neighbor. Smash that like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Ever had a Karen try to rule your block? We want to hear it. And don't forget, subscribe, because next week we've got a story where a man's mailbox started a war that ended in federal court. If I thought Karen's HOA cosplay was just a hobby-level power trip, I was dead wrong. Because 2 weeks after her laminated notice of violation, she crossed a line that turned her fantasy into an actual threat. She tried to tow my truck. I came outside one morning to see a guy in a reflective vest taking photos of my 2015 Silverado, like it was a stolen vehicle. The tow truck was already idling nearby, hazard lights blinking like it was a crime scene. I approached him calmly, and he muttered, "Just doing what the property manager told me," pointing to Karen, who was standing 3 feet away in a ridiculous sun hat, holding a clipboard like she was filming House Hunters, Dictator Edition. When I asked what law she was citing, she scoffed and said, "This vehicle violates the driveway composition clause. You agreed to this when you became a resident." I didn't agree to anything. I bought my home in 2016, 5 years before Karen even moved in with her matching garden gnomes and superiority complex. She waved a folder in my face containing a resolution that she and 2 of her wine club buddies signed at their so-called committee meeting, claiming it granted them enforcement rights. I reminded her that the sheriff's department might have some opinions about unauthorized property seizures. Her expression cracked. Karen waved the tow truck off, reluctantly, and hissed, "You'll regret not cooperating." I already did. The next morning, she'd posted copies of my alleged infractions on the community Facebook page with a caption, "Repeat offender alert. Do you want this in your neighborhood?" It was a blurry photo of my trash, can being 3 inches outside the curb line. The comments ranged from laughing emojis to actual concern. Some folks really believed she was a real HOA. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just flexing her control. She was manipulating perception. So I checked her paper trail. Turns out she'd opened a P.O. box labeled Maple Hills Compliance Center, registered a domain name for her fake association, and even ordered stationery with a logo that looked suspiciously like our city seal. I called City Hall. They were confused. "We don't have an HOA on file for your block," the clerk said, "and no code violations have been reported." So I asked her, "Can I send over what Karen's been mailing people?" There was a pause. Then she said, "Yes, please do." I sent screenshots, flyers, fake notices, everything. Within a day, I got a reply from the zoning department's legal counsel. "This is extremely irregular. We'll be investigating immediately." But Karen wasn't done. That weekend, she held a mandatory community safety meeting in the cul-de-sac, complete with orange cones, printed name tags, and a karaoke machine she used as a PA system. I watched from my porch, sipping coffee as she used her microphone to declare, "We have had repeated non-compliance from certain residents. This affects property values, people." Then she gestured toward my house. Subtle. One poor old couple raised their hands to ask if they'd be fined for their wind chimes. Karen frowned and said, "If they exceed the decibel limit during quiet hours, then yes." Someone else asked who enforces this. She just smiled and said, "We have our ways." That's when Greg, same guy with the mailbox incident, whispered to me, "She's lost it. I think she believes she is the law." And honestly, I think he was right. Karen didn't want to keep the community clean. She wanted to own it. And with every stage meeting, every flyer, every bluff about power she didn't legally have, more neighbors started believing she might be legit. That's when I knew it was time to shift gears. I played nice. I documented. Now it was time to expose her. But I had to do it the right way. Legally, publicly, and with just enough theatrical flair to really twist the knife. Because if Karen wanted Maple Hills to run like a dictatorship, I was about to give her a front row seat to a revolution. If Karen wanted to pretend she was a queen of Maple Hills, then it was time to send in a dragon. And in my case, that dragon wore tailored suits and charged $350 an hour. His name was Carl Dempsey, a real estate attorney with a reputation for eating HOAs alive. And when I showed him Karen compliance documents, he nearly choked on his coffee laughing. "This isn't a homeowners association," he said, flipping through a ridiculous binder. "It's a scrapbook of nonsense." Legally, she had no standing. Her articles of association were signed by homeowners. Her rules were fabricated, and the board meetings were just wine nights with her friends who thought Robert's Rules of Order was a dating column. But then Carl's face turned serious. "She's committing fraud," he said, "and if she filed anything official with the county under false pretenses, that's a whole new problem." That's when we found the document. A shady, barely legible filing with the county assessor's office that listed Karen as the provisional trustee of the Maple Hills Civic Maintenance Board. It was an old loophole from early 2000s real estate law that allowed developers to assign power to a temporary trustee only until the neighborhood formed an actual board. Problem was, no board ever formed. And Karen exploited that silence like a dictator seizing a power vacuum. Technically, she did file something real, but it was based on expired development plans that were never ratified. It was like claiming to be mayor of a town that didn't exist anymore. Carl grinned. She might have fooled the neighbors, but in court, she'd get obliterated. So we got to work. He drafted a cease and desist order citing unauthorized representation, civil harassment, and mail fraud. But I didn't stop there. I printed 50 copies of a flyer titled "The Truth About the Fake HOA" and personally hand-delivered them to every mailbox on the block. It included screenshots of Karen's fake site, her county filing with red flags highlighted, and a list of real HOA legal requirements she never met. I also linked the city's official response, which now included an active investigation notice. The reactions were instant. Greg dropped his Christmas lights back on his roof the same night, with a big plastic Santa flipping the bird. Carol from 2 doors down brought out her 4-foot-tall flamingo statues, like it was Mardi Gras. Even a retired couple across the street who'd been terrified of Karen's fake fines started waving to me again. But the best moment? Karen stormed down the street the next morning, screaming that I was spreading misinformation and inciting civil unrest. Civil unrest over a garden flamingo. When I told her I had legal representation, her expression collapsed into that tight-jawed smirk she wore whenever she realized she wasn't in control. She shouted something about defamation, but Carl had already emailed her an official response. Cease contact with my client immediately. You're operating under fraudulent authority. For a brief, glorious moment, she vanished. No flyers, no laminated threats, number 2 EM flashlight inspections. But just as I started to think it was over, Karen went nuclear. She showed up at the next city zoning meeting claiming I was leading an anti-community uprising, handed over a folder of doctor photos of my house, including one where she had clearly photoshopped overgrown weeds, and accused me of sabotaging property values with militant noncompliance. I nearly spit out my drink when I saw the agenda item. Citizen complaint, request for formal review of residential behavior. She was trying to get the city to legally reprimand me. Luckily, I had already forwarded everything to the zoning commission, including Karen's fake compliance reports, photos of her sneaking around at night, and her fictitious organizational seal that closely resembled a municipal badge, very illegal. The head of the commission, a no-nonsense guy named Mr. Chan, read her statement, raised one eyebrow, and asked, Ms. Abernathy, can you clarify under what authority you're issuing these citations? She blinked like a raccoon caught in headlights. Well, the Maple Hills Enrichment Committee has jurisdiction per community consensus. Chan deadpanned. So none. The room laughed. Karen turned beet red. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a neighborhood squabble anymore. This was a legal takedown in slow motion. And Karen was about to learn that the only thing worse than making up laws is breaking real ones. Just when I thought Karen might retreat into silence and lick her wounds, she came back with vengeance. And this time, she wasn't trying to run a fake HOA. She was trying to punish anyone who challenged it. The first shot fired? My mailbox. Torn clean off the post and left on my porch like a warning. No note, just the plastic shattered like a broken threat. Then came the anonymous letters. Concerned neighbor, typed in all caps, accusing me of destabilizing community harmony and hinting that the city may take further action if noncompliance persists. It was textbook intimidation. Except sloppy, she'd used the same font from her original flyers. Then I got a phone call from a confused realtor. Hi, Mr. Logan. I'm calling about the HOA resale disclosure you supposedly submitted last year. I hadn't submitted anything. That's when it hit me. Karen was forging documents, using the name of a non-existent HOA to create fake records on homes across our block, likely in an attempt to build legitimacy post facto. I looped Carl in immediately. He ran a search. We discovered she'd submitted falsified HOA due statements for at least 4 properties, claiming homeowners owed back payments. None of them had received notice until closing day, when it showed up as a lien in the escrow paperwork. It was like a financial ambush. One neighbor's home sale even fell through. I drove straight to the city clerk's office with Carl and showed them everything. They froze. This goes beyond zoning, the assistant said. This is real estate fraud. The city launched a formal investigation, but while they moved slowly, Karen was on a blitzkrieg. She set up an anonymous tip line through a Google voice number and encouraged neighbors to report decor violations, noise complaints, and community degradation. It was just her answering the phone in a British accent. I know this because Greg called it a troll and heard Karen clearly say, "Cheers, I'll file that immediately." Absolutely unhinged. Then, a major twist dropped from Carl's paralegal. Karen had done this before. Not just here, in 2 previous neighborhoods. One in Nevada, one in Arizona. She pulled the same scheme. Create a fake committee for documents, issue fines, and file bogus liens until homeowners either moved or complied. Her record was clean only because no one had pursued charges. Until now, Carl filed a formal fraud complaint across 3 counties.